You cannot teach a child to swim when he's drowning. It's too late by then. You need to teach the skills that he or she needs to survive before the need for survival presents itself. And that's sort of what we're going to be talking about today. Hi friends, this is Bethany Jennings, and you're listening to We Should Talk. It's a podcast where we talk about anything and everything to encourage, equip, and empower you to be a decent human. Let's talk. So, are we going to be talking about swimming lessons today? Probably not. But we are going to be talking about something sort of similar to the topic. We're going to be talking about overstimulation and or sensory overload. And it's quite a large topic, so we may have to split this into 2 episodes, and that's fine. We can do that. So let's get into it. As I said before, you can't teach a child to swim when he's drowning. That's not how it works. It's too late by then. You have to teach him what he needs before the need for survival ever shows up. Likewise, teaching a child coping skills before there is a coping need is the only way to help him or her build their self-regulating skills. Now, I understand that it's not just children who get overstimulated or experience sensory overload. So whether you have a child, work with children, or you yourself are experiencing this, I want you to keep listening because I think it might help you. In this episode, we're going to explain what sensory overload is, what it looks like, and probably the next episode, we're going to talk about how to avoid it or work through it, and what to do if you're dealing with a reluctant learner. Okay? So, let's learn how to swim. Here's the first part. What is overstimulation? Overstimulation, sometimes referred to as sensory overload, occurs when there are multiple senses being engaged at one time and the brain and body cannot process the stimuli at the rate required. It can be a very difficult concept to understand unless you have experienced it yourself. Generalizing the experience of every person is not only impossible, it's naive. As it's quite subjective to each person. So you can't just make this general statement, oh, this is what it feels like. So I'm gonna read some explanations of this to you from people who have experienced it. These are some descriptions from people who actually experience overstimulation or sensory overload regularly, on the regular. This is what they said. Melanie Johansson said, imagine being tied to the front of a freight train during a hurricane with an iPod on the highest volume of the most annoying song you know. That's what overstimulation is like for Melanie. That's intense. Jeanette said, sensory overload feels like, for me, everything is crawling. My skin is crawling. Noises feel like they are crawling in and out of my ears. My blood is skittering out of my heart. Air is crawling out of my lungs and racing up and down my throat. So for Jeanette, it feels like everything's crawling. I sound like spiders almost. Sam says, overstimulation is like being underwater at the beach while the waves wash away your thoughts. You're struggling to catch your breath, but every time you're able to reach the surface, you're struck by another wave and you can't organize a coherent thought. You can't get on top of it, and so you start to panic. Allie said, it's like being inside a pinball machine. That's what overstimulation is like for her. Jana says, I hear both everything and nothing at the same time when I'm overstimulated. It feels like you're surrounded by a circular wall and all the walls are folding in on themselves at once. Genevieve said, imagine opening a door and through it you think will be a peaceful valley with rolling hills, trees, birds, and not a soul around. But when you take that first step, you're falling down from an airplane with no parachute. That's what overstimulation feels like for her. So, some very different experiences for these people. And while there are some commonalities across each person's experience, the sensitivity and reactivity can vary. Variables in sensitivity include time, setting, stress, fatigue, hunger, illness, irregular sleep patterns, medication inconsistencies, and there's gobs more. These are things that change the sensitivity of people. The reactivity can also vary for each person and for each person's individual experience. Each experience they have could be different. One episode may result in, like if someone has extreme anxiety, particularly children, one episode may result in that person with extreme anxiety presenting or a tantrum, like a meltdown. When they have this overload, it looks like it's an extreme reaction, extreme overload. It's very much acting out, and they have a tantrum or a meltdown. And the next time, it may result in the very same person showing no reaction at all, like to even normal stimuli. So it's just a shutdown, right? So it presents in different ways. It can be a meltdown or a shutdown. It depends on the setting. It depends on the stimuli. It depends on a lot of things. So, as I said, generalizing the experience is not only impossible, it's very naive. So, those are people's experiences that we were just talking about. What exactly is it, right? Let's get into the biology and psychology of this. In the thalamus, if it's working properly, it functions as a kind of a sensory gatekeeper. This is part of your brain, right? It functions as like a sensory gatekeeper, and it filters sensory input and eliminates the unimportant parts that you're sensing, which allows your brain to process the stimuli and react appropriately. That was a mouthful, I know. Essentially, the brain's got two jobs: take in information and keep out information. Simply working in a cluttered space can limit the brain function capacity for the task at hand, because the human brain, especially the sensory sensitive brain, has a limited process capacity. Experiencing multiple stimuli will force other brain processes to go into the subconscious and reduce the function in the forefront as needed. Right? So when you are particularly susceptible to sensory overload, your brain isn't processing everything it needs to. And some of the stuff that you need to be happening is forced into the subconscious, and you cannot function at the level you need to. So when your five senses take in too much information for your brain to process, your brain goes into crisis mode. This means you start to feel anxious, panicked, or unsafe, which results in fight, flight, or freeze, right? There's also fawn that a lot of people don't talk about. I think I talked about that in another episode. So when your five senses take in too much information, your brain goes into crisis mode. You're going to feel anxious, panicked. You're going to feel like you're not safe. And you're going to go to fight, flight, or freeze mode. And this presents as meltdown or shutdown, right? So there's the science behind that meltdown, shutdown that I was talking about earlier. All right. That was a lot to take in. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to let you process. I want you, if you don't have it out yet, I want you to pause, go get a journal, or at least get out your phone and take notes, because I want you to answer these questions as we go. Number one question so far: what have I told you that you didn't already know before? What's something that I've said today that's been like, oh, okay, I get it. So type it out, write it down. Is there something that I've already said that's kind of been an eye-opener for you? Something that you didn't know before that you're kind of realizing, okay, I could see where that comes from. Then I want you to answer this question: have you seen someone in your life, be it a child, a spouse, a parent, you yourself, Have you seen someone in your life experience something similar to what was described in the quotes from those who actually do experience overstimulation? Remember those quotes that talked about being tied to a freight train or being washed under the waves or stepping out of an airplane or feeling like things are crawling. Have you ever seen someone in your life experience that? Who was it? Write whatever details you remember about it. All right. So, before we go, one more thing. Let's talk about what overstimulation actually looks like. I'm going to list some things. It's very not comprehensive at all because there's a lot going on with overstimulation. But here's a compiled list, though not comprehensive. It's a list of possible overstimulation indicators, right? Your indicators. You see this, hear this, feel this. It could be an indicator that someone is experiencing overstimulation. All right, here we go. You know what? Before I do this, as I'm saying this, I want you to write down ones that you've seen, okay? Since you already got your journal out, why not? Here's some indicators. Covering eyes or ears. Anxiety, stress, or inability to relax. Fear or panic. Drowsiness and fatigue. Insomnia. Muscle tension. Tremors. Reduced balance or coordination. Self-harming. Stimming, meaning repetitive or unusual body movements or noises, like constant clicking or tapping your fingers, that's called stimming. Irritability, nausea or vomiting, angry outbursts, restlessness or fidgeting, hiding. I worked with a lot of students when they got overstimulated, they just went and hid under their desk, or I had a safe space in my classroom. There was just like a corner that was secluded and other students couldn't see them, but I could. And I said, if you're feeling like you can't take it, just go back there. And they knew, okay, go into the safe space, the chill zone. So hiding, elopement. I don't mean going to get married. I'm just so overstimulated, I'm going to go get married. No, elopement meaning you running away to escape. Crying, rapid breathing, high excitability or hyperactivity. Like the littlest thing gets them hyped. Avoidance of specific settings. A lot of times when my students would lose their cool, we tracked it and we recognized patterns. Okay, every time they go to gym or every time they go to lunch, they melt. They avoid. In order to get out of it, they melt. And it was a lot of times because it was a more of an unstructured setting and they couldn't handle it. Avoidance of specific settings. Refusal to participate in certain activities. Skin changes. They get really sweaty or they get really flushed, or they get really clammy or things like that. Skin changes. Usually those are visible or tangible. Difficulty concentrating. Not wanting to be touched at all. An increase in chewing of like non-food items. Like they want to chew on something silicone. Like I used to have a silicone, like a necklace chewy thing for my students. Or because they'd start chewing on their shirts and then they'd have a giant slobber ring on their shirts. Teaching is it is a very gross occupation. I loved it though. All right. So I just listed a lot of these. A lot. Go back, rewind it, listen to it if you need to. But I want you to take a few minutes and write down any of these that you have seen people do. Okay? Whew. So that was a lot. So we are for sure going to break this into 2 episodes. So this time we talked about what sensory overload is. We kind of talked about the science of that, the physical and psychological side of that. And we said this is what it looks like, right? So next time, we're going to talk about how can we avoid it or work through it. And also what to do if the person you're trying to help doesn't want help. All right, friends, big topic. We'll talk more about it next time. Well, that was fun. I'm glad you stuck around for the whole thing. And thank you for talking to me today. Y'all go like and follow and review and do all the podcast things that people do. And don't forget to be a good human.